The following story is inspired by many true crime podcasts reporting on real cases over the years. Many seek to get justice and tell stories of those who cannot tell them themselves. Although our story is not real, we hope that you enjoyed this homage to one of our favorite podcasts, Crime Junkies. Check out all of their podcasts from AudioChuck, including The Dead, Park Predators, Counterclock, Supernatural, Dark Down East, and the podcast that inspired our storytelling podcast, Full Body Chills. Please go find your favorite from any of the AudioChuck productions. We are not affiliated with them in any way, just lifelong fans. And if anyone from AudioChuck hears this, we hope that we did you justice. Also, hi, Superfans here. And to Brit, go Chiefs. Hello, fellow crime enthusiasts. I'm Amanda.
And my name is Tiffany. You can call me Tiff.
On today's podcast, we are going to take over a little territory from our podcast sister, Deborah, who typically covers true crime stories in the parks. Today, we are discussing the loss of Cindy Birmingham in Colorado Springs on a hiking trail. It was August in 2022, and Cindy and her husband, Robert, were taking a trip before school started. You see, Cindy was a teacher, so she had to get back to her students in just a few short weeks. Unfortunately, she was never able to do that. Cindy and Robert were familiar with this hiking trail. They had been there multiple times together, and Cindy had gone there before they were married. Cindy and Robert were still newlyweds after just celebrating their 1-year anniversary. And actually, Tiff, it's kind of a crazy backstory, so I'll get back to it.
Okay, noted.
Have you ever been to Garden of the Gods in Colorado?
No, although I am a Midwestern girl, I've never made it to Colorado. But I've seen pictures of it, and it is gorgeous.
Yes, it is beautiful. I mean, it definitely stands up to the name Garden of the Gods. These cliffs are like this really bright orange clay color, and they go to crazy heights in the sky. They make some awesome shapes as you're walking around, and some of the cliffs reach up to 300 feet high. Actually, when Matt and I went there like 8 years ago, before we had baby Ella, there were mountain climbers all over. But there are certain trails that you could just walk on. Now, Cindy and her husband weren't mountain climbers by any means, but they did take a hiking route. And on this route, there was a very sharp drop-off. So now we get to some points of the story that are a little muddied, so hang in there with me. Tiff, do you remember that Jim Carrey movie called Yes Man?
Was that the movie where he decides just to say yes to everything and then, step out of his comfort zone?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how much you remember of the movie, but there's this, group of joggers that they also take pictures. It's like a photography jogging group.
Okay, yeah. I vaguely remembered. Zooey Deschanel's in it, right?
Yeah, she's like the love interest. And they go together and they jog and take pictures. So it turns out that actually kind of exists. There was a group of hikers out there, and they would go around and take photos using the beautiful scenery at Garden of the Gods. Okay, Tiff, what is one of our biggest frustrations as true crime addicts?
Poor police work?
I mean, yes, but what else?
Oh my gosh, missing evidence? No witnesses? Cameras are never working?
Right? There are never any working cameras. Well, I have a new frustration for you. There were 14 people hiking in the area, exactly where Cindy died, and nobody caught anything on camera.
Okay, that is super frustrating, but they weren't video cameras, right? They were for photography.
Right, so it was point-and-shoot cameras, but still, that's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, usually there are no cameras, and now we have 14 cameras with nothing. So were they up there with Cindy on the cliff or close by or?
Well, Cindy and her husband were up on a tall, sharp drop-off, and the photography enthusiasts were down at the bottom of the cliff.
Oh no.
Yeah. So obviously the police spoke with everyone, but to get a general idea of what happened, basically the photography group was down at the bottom of the cliff before she fell. A couple of them did report hearing a scream, and some of them did end up pinpointing where the scream was coming from. They realized that it was coming from Cindy as she fell, and they saw her plunge to her death.
That is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
So did anyone look up at the cliff? I mean, how tall was it?
So the cliff was 107 feet up from where the hikers were, and typically a 100-foot fall is considered lethal. The fall landed Cindy about 20 yards ahead of where the hikers were. Obviously, that's a very tall height, and you would not expect someone to survive that. The group of people were able to locate Cindy's body, and here, actually, I have an audio interview of the first witness that made it onto the scene. They were interviewed for a documentary.
We were all very frantic. Nobody knew what to do. I ended up being the first one to make it to her body, and it was a horrific scene. Her body was bent in ways that a body should not bend. We all assumed that she was dead because it was so high. I mean, who could survive that fall? But when I got there, I could see her eyelashes flutter. I called out behind me for someone to call 911, and then I just tried to talk to her. I just tried to be there for her. I really didn't know what to say. I was saying things like, help is coming, we're right here with you. And then something I never expected. She spoke back to me. It was like a really quiet, hushed tone, like she was using everything in her body to say this one word. I leaned down really close and put my ear up to her lips, and she whispered, "Pushed."
Oh my God, Amanda. I just got chills all over my whole body.
I know, right? Me too. And think about all those people that were there. They will never forget that day.
So she said pushed, like she was pushed by her husband? I mean, statistically speaking, it is the spouse, so case closed, right?
That would be a very short episode if that were the case. But I mean, that's what everyone thinks. The hiker goes on to say in the interview that they all looked up at the top of the cliff and they saw a man standing there, which was in fact Robert, and we'll get to him shortly. Sadly, Cindy did end up dying before any kind of help could make it to her. It was like that was her last dying word.
Okay, so what did Robert say?
Well, when the police arrived on the scene, Robert was visibly upset. All the reports note that he was kind of sunken into himself, almost in shock. And he told the officers that he thought Cindy was having a good day, and he doesn't know why she did it.
Excuse me? Why she did it?
Yeah. So Robert's version of the story is that Cindy had been struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts in the past. This is actually confirmed by her family, friends, and her ex-husband. So it seems that Cindy had been having a hard time, and then Robert said a couple days before her death, she seemed to be turning around. He said that Cindy was up and out of bed and wanting to do something, which is why they took the trip. Robert said that he assumed that with the school year coming up, Cindy got some motivation and some passion back to make some steps towards recovery.
Okay, so depression and suicide are very difficult subjects to talk about, and there are so many people that have experienced with this and in their lives and the lives of the ones that they love. The pattern that Robert is describing is actually accurate from specialists in the field and loved ones left behind from suicide.
Yeah, it's almost like once the person has decided to end their life, there's a relief that is lifted, and some people have reported that they believed that that person was getting better, which can make their loss that much more difficult.
Okay, so people have confirmed of suicidal thoughts and depression in her past. So what did the police think? Did they believe Robert?
Well, I don't know if they believe Robert in the beginning or not, but they sure seem to believe the suicide note.
I'm sorry, the suicide note?
Yeah, so it turns out that Cindy actually had a suicide note on her when she died.
Like she carried it around in her pocket or what?
Kind of. They found a folded note in a zipper in the pocket of her fanny pack that she was wearing while hiking. And actually, Tiff, if you could read that for us, I just sent it over to you.
Yeah, okay, let's see. Dear friends and loved ones, I am sure this is not easy to hear. However, I have been struggling with extreme sadness and I cannot seem to get away from it. Don't be fooled by outward appearances or what people tell you. Sometimes there is more going on below the surface. I wanted to say goodbye to anyone who has ever been in my life. Please do not feel guilty, for this decision has not been made lightly, and I feel I am more a burden to this world and a burden to myself. I do not believe that I would be able to make a difference in the classroom, which was one of the hardest things to admit. I'd love to believe that I can be that person, but I fear I am not. I am ready to give up the weight that is the day-to-day of living. Please know that this decision brings me peace, and I hope it will to others in time. Wow. So she actually had a suicide note on her. So the police believe Robert then that she planned to come out here and jump off a cliff?
I mean, like it says in the letter, no one really knows what's going on. Obviously, Robert has been living with her and they've been married for a year. The depression that had been confirmed by various other family members, including her parents and, like I said, her ex-husband.
Right. I know, you mentioned ex-husband earlier. That's a little strange that they'd talk to him, right? How is he involved in this?
I'm so glad you asked. Actually, the ex-husband reached out to the police. His name is Terry, and although he and Cindy weren't married for very long, he reported that Cindy had been struggling with depression, which, again, everyone else admitted in the documentary as well. Also, it turns out that Terry actually had a previous wife that had killed herself.
What?
Yeah, so let's go over the timeline. Terry, Cindy's ex-husband, was married to a woman named Linda in 2015, and Linda committed suicide in 2016. Then Terry and Cindy met in 2018. They were married and divorced within a year, listed as irreconcilable differences.
Wait, what was Linda's cause of death, though?
It was an overdose. She took pills and left a note.
Okay, just making sure it wasn't a cliff.
Dude, right? Okay, so now Terry and Cindy are divorced, and Cindy meets Robert in 2020. They were together for like 6 months, and then they were married. And then, like I said before, they were married for a year before Cindy's death.
Okay, so why did Terry contact the police again?
So Terry said he found out about Cindy's death through common friends and family, and he wanted the police to know that Cindy struggled with depression.
But why? No one is asking him anything. Why call them?
Terry said that he wanted to, quote, get it on record in case anyone was looking at Robert, unquote.
That seems weird, right? Like the ex-husband is calling to vouch for the new husband? I mean, if the police interviewed him and asked him these questions, then obviously he's going to answer, but to call the police?
And it was like the day of, Tiff. Like, the autopsy wasn't completed. Interviews of witnesses had just begun.
Okay, got it. So, super weird.
Speaking of the autopsy and forensic reports, there were some odd findings.
What kind of odd findings?
Well, the autopsy came up with blunt force trauma, obviously because of the impact, but it was actually the evidence that was on her at the time that raised concerns. During the analysis of the suicide letter, while they were confirming handwriting samples, it turns out that the paper the suicide note was written on was not new.
Like from an old pad or something?
No, like the note was written years before.
How?
Well, you know how you write on a pad of paper and then on the next page there's like an indent on the new piece of paper? It turns out there was an old date and note printed on the paper. I have pictures of it scanned in on a document. Would you like to read it?
You don't have to ask me twice. Okay, it's loading. So it scanned through and it looked like at the top of the note they highlighted an area in the blank margin that says Dr. G appointment 1/3/19. Bring insurance card. Okay, but I mean, she could have written any date on there, right? Like 1942. That doesn't mean it was that date.
No, but it was just kind of the first clue to look at it a little bit closer. especially since it seems like the note would have been made before the appointment, not after. Also, there was like this spaghetti sauce stain on the back of the folded bit, which was weird, but I guess based on oxidation and spoilage dating, which looks at a typical breakdown rates of food substances, that stain was there for at least over 2 years, possibly more.
Okay, hold on. So Cindy for sure didn't write this in 2022 before she died then?
Exactly. And Tiff, do you remember her note had some odd phrases in it, like, "I do not believe that I would be able to make a difference in the classroom," which was one of the hardest things to admit. "I'd love to believe that I am that person, but I fear I am not."
Oh, right. She was already a teacher by the time she died. But this sounds like she hasn't even been in a classroom yet. So what did the police think of this?
Well, looking through the resources, it looks like both Robert and Terry were brought in for questioning, fingerprinting, and all of that, although no one was officially announced a suspect to begin with. During interviews, Terry admitted to Cindy writing letters of suicide in the past, which, as we know, he called to tell the police right away. He said he had wanted a divorce because he'd already lost a wife to suicide, and he said he couldn't stand to go through that loss again.
Well, that's selfish and shitty, but okay.
Yeah, no one's perfect, I guess, but Terry was shown the letter to see if he remembered it. He said no, not that one.
So she wrote the letters during suicidal struggles, but he doesn't recognize that specific one.
Yeah, maybe the spaghetti sauce threw him off. I don't know. But luckily, this little letter had more information to spill. Forensic reports showed that there were multiple fingerprints on the letter. Not only was Cindy's fingerprints on the suicide note, but both Terry and Robert's prints were found as well.
Holy shit.
So Terry lied. He for sure had access to the letter. And Robert, who also claimed to have never seen this letter, lied as well.
So what does this mean?
Well, the police aren't quite sure yet, but they aren't ruling it a suicide. Then, if we fast forward some time, both Terry and Robert were brought to trial on suspicion of murder. In court, the prosecutors revealed that Terry and Robert had been in communication with each other before Cindy's death, with, get this, hundreds of phone calls over a span of 6 months before she died. More than that, they found text messages between them, and their messages were way more than anyone expected. There were over 300 text messages sent between Robert and Terry, and a total of 47 hours talking on the phone.
Listen, Amanda, I love you. You're my best friend, but no way have we ever had that much communication.
I love you too, boo, but yeah, same. I mean, add up our TikToks and our Snapchats, maybe, but not phone calls. That's reserved for emergencies, like one of our houses burned down.
Yeah, if I see your name calling me, I'm like, what's on fire? Okay, so back to the story. What was with all the messages and the phone calls? Were they plotting her murder? And the plan was Terry saved an old suicide note and gave it to Robert, and then Robert pushed Cindy off a cliff to make it look like she jumped?
Yeah, kinda. That's what the court discovered.
I don't get it though. What does Terry have to gain from this? Did Terry and Robert know each other and they just hated Cindy that much, or what?
Well, when Terry's first wife, Linda, died and it was ruled a suicide, Terry did end up getting life insurance money for that.
Okay, well, Terry isn't married to Cindy anymore, so Terry wouldn't get that money.
No, but it was assumed that Robert would.
So how does that help Terry?
It seems that they were going to split it. Terry confessed that he and Robert were going to share Cindy's life insurance money in their new life together.
No.
Yes.
Plot twist.
Yes. And Terry and Robert were in fact having a secret love affair behind Cindy's back during the marriage between Cindy and Robert.
My jaw is dropped. I'm speechless.
Yeah, the text messages between the two were very personal, and Robert explained to the court how he and Terry ran into each other on occasion at mutual friends' weddings and events due to their commonality. Cindy. They were always cordial as ex-husband and current husband, but something more sparked, I guess.
But why murder? Couldn't they have just gotten a divorce and moved on with their lives?
Well, they could have, but Terry had been widowed before and he got life insurance money from his ex-wife. So they basically realized this would be 2 birds, 1 stone, getting rid of Cindy and getting money to run away together.
So Terry kept the letter, though. He'd been planning something the whole time, or what?
No, actually, he said that he had found it years after his divorce from Cindy. It was in an old drawer, and Cindy and Robert were already married when Terry found the old letter. I guess the plan sort of formed after that. And Robert and Terry never thought any connections would be made between the ex-husband and the current husband working together. Plus, family and friends were all confirming depression in Cindy's past, making suicide plausible.
Wow. So did Terry actually kill his first wife then?
No, it seems that was a terrible tragedy, and no connections have ever been made to Terry, showing foul play. But both Terry and Robert are serving sentences for murder and conspiracy to murder.
So Terry and Robert will not get their happily ever after.
No. And Cindy lost her life, and a classroom of kids won't get their teacher, as well as friends and family members who lost their loved one.
I hate it that we never get a happy ending.
True. It's tough to be a true crime enthusiast, but justice was served, and Terry and Robert didn't get away with murder.
Very true. Also, after knowing the whole story, I'm kind of haunted by the words in Cindy's letter. Don't be fooled by outward appearances or what people tell you. Sometimes there's more going on below the surface. It's like a reflection on her own case.
I thought so too. Well, that's all for this week. Join us next week as we uncover a 40-year-old cold case murder. And I mean cold. We discuss a body that was actually discovered under 20 feet of snow.
Well, I'll bring a blanket then, and see you next week.